Hey Cricut Crafters, my name is Shea and I'm so excited for today's video because y'all have been asking me time and time again to show how to do print and cut and teach you all the little tips and tricks that I know about print and cut. To date, I have not had issues with print and cut that I haven't been able to figure out, and I know Cricut print and cut is probably one of the biggest questions when it comes to the Cricut world. They've also recently done an update on it. Originally, before I was filming this video, which is currently being filmed on May 10th, 2022, prior to this video being filmed, there were actually limitations on the size you could do for print and cut that were 9.25 by 6.75. And a lot of people were complaining that, hey, that's not big enough for me. We have a whole printer that can print off a full page, and I feel like I'm wasting it, especially when you're using sticker paper. But now with the new Cricut update, as of today's date that I'm filming this, you can actually go ahead and do print and cut for 11.5 by 8.5, which is a full piece of printer paper or cardstock if you're using the printer paper side, the cardstock like I do. For today's tutorial, I am going ahead and sharing my screen right here, but I'm also going to say hello and I'm over here in the corner. So the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and select upload. I did create my own little business cards off camera. I actually did it on a live, so if you wanted to see that, go ahead and check out my lives playlist over on my YouTube channel. I created it over on Canva, and I had a few of you lovely people like Nana helping me over there to figure it all out. So thank you to all of you for saving me and helping me figure out how to use Canva. Okay, so for the purposes of me sharing my screen, it does not allow me to show my downloads folder for privacy reasons, unfortunately. So all I did was go into my file folder and selected the one that I wanted to do. This is the business card that I created on Canva. You can create it wherever you want to. I personally saved mine just as a JPEG image. So once that's there, you're going to select on this complex and continue. Leave this how it is and apply and continue. Now here, make sure you select print and cut image. If you were to select this cut image one, it will just show up in Cricut Design Space as this rectangle, and that's what it will print out as. So you want to select print and cut image and upload. As I mentioned, for this specific one that I'm showing you, I am uploading a JPEG image. I will also show you how to take a regular SVG and turn it into a print and cut file for a sticker later on in the tutorial. So for now, we're going to go ahead and select that business card and add it to Canvas. I'm going to go ahead and size it to where I want it. So let me bring it down a little bit to size. Once I have it at the desired size, I'm going to go ahead and duplicate it as many times as I feel like I need. Let's try to do 6 and see if I can fit that all on one page. If not, we'll come back and take a look. As you can see on the right-hand panel here, it is all under print and cut because that's the way that I uploaded my JPEG image into Cricut Design Space as I just showed you. But like I mentioned, I will explain if it's just showing cut or something else, I will show you how to do this. To do print and cut, if this is your first time, make sure that you calibrate your printer with your Cricut Design Space. If you need a tutorial on how to calibrate your printer with Cricut Design Space, I can absolutely do that for you, so let me know in the comments down below and I would be happy to show you how to do that. So this is the size that I'm doing for them in case you're curious, and I was able to actually fit 8 on one page because of the new update. If you do need to move them around, just take your little mouse or cursor and drag it over, and you can actually just manipulate where the registration marks are. If you're wondering what registration marks even means, it's actually this black border you see around the outside. It's kind of like a black rectangle. You might see it here in the preview screen when I'm sharing my screen. And what it is how your Cricut machine is going to know exactly where to cut it out. So when I go to print this off, you will see in a moment what I'm talking about, but when I go to print this, my Cricut and my printer are going to work together to print it out, and because of the registration marks, my Cricut machine is going to be able to recognize exactly where to cut it out to match what's on my Cricut Design Space. So that's why these registration marks are so important, and that's where the biggest trial and error comes with print and cut, because if your registration marks are not printing clearly, if you're printing on certain color paper or sticker paper, certain types of it, it cannot register it depending on which Cricut machine you're using. There are differences, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and it gives you a little bit of trouble. So let's continue for now and see what happens. and then we can also talk about some troubleshooting ways to fix it towards the end of the video. I know the camera angle just changed, but as I was editing this, I realized I wanted to mention a couple things that I forgot. If you have the newest Cricut Maker 3 or the Cricut Explorer 3, there is a difference that is beneficial for you. The sensor for the print and cut is more powerful in the Maker 3 and the Explorer 3, which means you're not only limited to colors like white paper, you can also use other colors of light paper. The darker is going to be a hard contrast between the registration marks, so it's going to be tricky to read, but the lighter versions of your paper or your cardstock is a great option for print and cut if you have the newest Cricut Maker 3 and the Cricut Explorer 3, like I mentioned. I currently do not have that machine, so unfortunately I cannot show you, but go ahead and try it out for yourself and let us know how it goes. If you have the other Cricuts and you're having trouble, make sure you're using white paper. That might also be the issue. Alrighty, on to the rest of the video. So I'm going to select continue. My printer is already turned on. So what it's asking me to do is the first step is to print. So I'm going to select send to printer because my printer is already calibrated and set up with my Cricut Design Space. You can see here, you can select your printer. So this is the one I'm using, which is the Epson EcoTank 2760, and copies I'm just going to do 1. Whenever I'm making any type of sticker, business card, care instructions, essentially anything with print and cut, my personal preference is to select add bleed, and what that does is it adds a little bit of extra of the same pattern that you have currently on whatever you're using. For example, in this specific example, it's going to just do a little bit extra of those little florals. You'll see what I mean. It adds just a little bit of a border. That way when your Cricut cuts it out, if it accidentally cuts it out just a little bit off, you're not going to have just a white strip across it. It will look very flawless and like it was meant to be there. You're not even going to notice the difference. But if you didn't select bleed and you're trying to cut out something like this, you might actually notice the difference. So go ahead and add bleed. And I'm just going to select print. I have already loaded my cardstock into my printer. Here's one that I've already printed out and used, but this is the size cardstock that I am using for today, and I just purchased this in a big bundle at Michael's. It is lightweight cardstock and it works really great for business cards and things like that. Perfect, so it is done. I do want to go over this a little bit and show you some things before I go ahead and cut it out. So the first thing I want to show you are these registration lines. They are crisp and clean. Sometimes they're dotted like I have shown in previous little YouTube shorts, and you can refer to that one right up here if you need to see what I'm talking about, and little hacks to make it a little bit easier if your registration marks are not being recognized. Cricut Design Space will give you an error message and it will say cannot recognize registration marks and ask you to try again. Another thing I wanted to show you are the bleed lines. As you can see, you can't even really tell the difference. It is that tiny little bit past the flowers, and it does make a big difference when your Cricut goes ahead and cuts it out in my own personal preference. So now that I'm done this, I'm ready to add it to whatever Cricut mat I choose to use. So I'm just gonna go ahead and put it on my Cricut mat. It doesn't necessarily matter where I'm putting it on my Cricut mat because of the registration lines. So I don't need to precisely match anything, like I said, because my Cricut is going to recognize the lines and cut exactly as it is on my digital mat on Cricut Design Space, like I showed you. Make sure it's on there really good. You do not want this moving around or it's not going to cut properly. Okay. There we go. Now let's go ahead and load our Cricut and cut it out. Perfect. So all I need to do is load it like regular, anything for your Cricut. I'm just going ahead and selecting my material, which I am selecting medium cardstock because I want it to cut a little bit thicker. So right now you can see there's a little bit of a light there, and what it's doing is trying to read the registration marks. It's a little noisy, but it's gonna go around my whole page and just make sure it can recognize all of it. If not, like I said, it will give you the error message. And if you happen to get that error message, not to worry, go to this timestamp right here towards the end of the video and I will explain all of the troubleshooting tips and tricks to make sure that print and cut works flawlessly for you. Now that it's done reading it, it's ready to cut it out. So it's gonna go ahead and do its thing. Once it's done, go ahead and unload your mat. When I am removing anything from my mat, I flip it over upside down. You can use your spatula or your hands if you prefer, and carefully start pulling it down. I also like to just use my hands and pull it up that way, but whatever way you prefer, go ahead and do that. You just don't want to bend your cardstock or whatever material you're using. And I will show you what it looks like with that bleed and what I meant by that border. Okay, first of all, let me move these to the side for a moment and we will look at them in a moment. So this is what's left on my Cricut mat right now. You can see the registration lines and marks are still there. They haven't been touched, but you can see this little border around the outside, and what that was is the bleed that we added. If I wouldn't have added that in, it could have possibly cut a little bit of the white, and then it would just look a little funky on my business card. So I really like adding that little bit of bleed. It really just fills it in more with whatever pattern you have on it or color, and you don't notice the difference. Now let's take a look at the business cards and care instructions that I've made with the print and cut. As you can see, they're all cut the same size. The color is really great thanks to my printer, and it really just did a good job of cutting them all the same, which I think is really important for something like this that I'm wanting to do for my business, for example. So this was a great success so far. But next, I'm going to show you how to do stickers. I was hoping to jam-pack this video with both print and cut options for stickers and doing it with cardstock like I showed today. But I try my best not to make my videos too much information at once, because then it can be overwhelming and a lot to take in, and that is not what I'm trying to do here. My goal is to help you get crafting and figure out how to work your Cricut and all of the little things with Cricut. Print and cut is a huge one that a lot of people have troubles with, and I feel like it's really important that I touch all parts on this so that I can really help you and encourage you to get on with print and cut. It is such a game changer when you're able to figure it out, and I promise you it's really not as tricky as it seems. So let's wrap up today's video with me talking specifically some troubleshooting ways to fix your print and cut issues you may be having. If I don't mention something that's been happening to you, please let me know in the comments down below and I would be happy to troubleshoot for you, or we can talk about it in the comments and see what fixes worked for you. And not to worry, the sticker print and cut tutorial with a full Cricut Design Space side of how to create it from an SVG to a print and cut file is coming out later on this week. So I'm not leaving you hanging too long. Maybe you can master this in the meantime. Go ahead and cut out some fun cake toppers. You can do this with so many things, but you can go ahead and play around with it a little bit. If you have kids, it's a really fun way to add it. So let's talk about some great troubleshooting tips and tricks. The first one I have shown in a previous short, so I will go ahead and overlay the image of it as I'm talking. Sometimes your registration marks do come out a little faded, they're dotted lines, and it's really hard for your Cricut to read. Like I said, you will get that error message. So a couple of ways to really help out. First of all, make sure that your mat is strong enough to be able to hold down your cardstock without damaging it. So if you want to use your light grip Cricut mat, that's okay, go ahead and do that. Just make sure it's clean and sticky enough. Otherwise, I highly suggest for print and cut, you go ahead and use your green mat. It's pretty good, and it's the standard grip mat. If it is clean, it should be good enough to add on there and go ahead and do. Like I said, just use your spatula or something when you're pulling it up. So with your registration lines, it can be super tricky sometimes to read it. So what really helps me, as I showed in the video that I'm playing right there, is taking some type of ruler or straight edge object and a Sharpie. I grabbed the wrong Sharpie. Hold that thought. A Sharpie, and going ahead and just tracing over the registration marks. That definitely helps when it's hard to read it. Another thing is lighting, making sure that your lights are bright enough. You shouldn't need anything crazy, but as long as your overhead light is on, maybe turn on a lamp if you need, but it needs good lighting to be able to read. I have seen little hacks that sometimes people need to just close the top hood so that the light on your Cricut machine can reflect off the registration marks. Try that little tip if you're struggling with lighting and nothing is working. Another great option is using painter's tape or light grip masking tape to be able to put around the edges so that it can hold down your paper, and also the registration marks can really be read. I have seen people using clear masking tape over the registration marks if they need it to be recognized better. If you are using sticker paper and you're using the glossy paper, that one gives a lot of trouble to people. If you're still wanting that glossy effect on your paper, a great little tip is to go ahead, cut out your stickers on your sticker paper, and then adding some type of contact paper. I like to use the one that I use for my transfer tape on my Cricut crafts, and I go ahead and I put it, but I make sure to cut it out so it is not touching my registration marks. Go ahead and put it within the borders of your registration marks, load it into your Cricut, and it's going to cut it out. Just do not cover your registration marks, or your Cricut will give you that error message. So that is a great way to make your stickers waterproof and still be able to cut it out. Now take into account that you will need to add extra pressure if you're doing the method that I just mentioned, because now your Cricut will need to cut through your cardstock and whatever you've laid over top to make it either waterproof or more of that glossy look. You can still use glossy paper for print and cut, but there are certain ones that work better than others, so make sure to do your research on things like that, and if you are having troubles, maybe try using a different option. Lastly, for print and cut, sometimes the error is your printer. For example, last week when I was showing this video here of my registration marks not being read, it was actually because my printer just needed one of those head cleaning things. It did it by itself. I just did the maintenance thing on it. I am not really a tech person, so I selected head cleaning. It did its thing, and then the next time I did print and cut, flawless, back at it again. I really hope those little troubleshooting tips and tricks that I just mentioned help you to be able to do Cricut print and cut. If not, like I said, please let me know in the comments down below what errors you're having or what's going on, and I would be happy to help you figure it out. If you have personally had any errors or issues with Cricut print and cut and you've been able to successfully figure it out, please let us know as well, because I feel like a lot of people can learn from this. Like I said, it's one of the biggest questions I see in the Cricut community, and it's such a great crafting option to have, so I want everyone to be able to do it. As I said, I'm doing my best to not make this video too long for you today, and I'm so excited to have the sticker version of this video coming out later on in the week. So make sure you subscribe so that you can see when that one is up. Thank you so much for joining me today, and let's get started on Cricut print and cut. Bye for now, and happy crafting.